Let's see. I think 2, 1. Hey, welcome to Real Job Optional Freedom. Real estate can be complicated. Let an investor guide you. We are here to demystify the complex nature of real estate by getting you answers from professionals who are in the trenches so you can be the hero of your real freedom story. Welcome to Real Money, a weekly segment of the Real Freedom Podcast, where we ask the most pressing real estate questions. Your co-host here, Kevin Gilbert, and I'm Chris Bell. And today we've got a great one for you today, guys. We've got probably the most asked question anytime we start talking about real estate and doing real estate deals. People always seem to ask, well, where do you find real estate deals and how do you market for them to get them? And we're going to answer some of those questions today and bring you guys a ton of value. And Kevin, let's kick it off. What's one of the best ways that you've used to find real estate deals?
Well, we go through market cycles, so the strategies change based on where we are in those market cycles. Right now, if you call an agent up and you ask to see a house, they're gone in about 2 seconds. So that's not what I'm using much right now, but I did get one deal off in the last year, so I can't say that they're not there. But I did some math with somebody recently, and a lot of my business is follow up, right? So I'm looking for these houses, and I'm following up with them, right? So over the last 2 years, I've met with a lot of people, and if you're looking at five, six, seven, eight houses a week, and you're doing this, and you're following up with those people, you know, you get to a point where you're following up with about 4,000 properties, right? And I don't need 4,000 properties. I mean, a small fraction of that, right? And that turns into a huge deal. So strategies change based on where the market is, and you don't need a lot of houses to win, but you need to actively look and you need to be working on it. So um, it depends on what you're looking for. Are you working a full time job and you're looking for a investment return? There's some good strategies there, especially if you're dealing with cash and you're looking for one house. If you're way more active, you got to look for a deeper deal, I guess, and you got to let some marginal ones go, or some even great deals if you don't have the strict cash to do it. So sometimes I run across deals that would be fantastic, but my cash is already tied up and there's no financing arranged, and I got to pass on them, even though they'd be great deals. So you talk about strategies for finding the deals. Some of the ones I use as a actual active investor, who's doing this full time, you know, some of them feel stupid. I call bandit signs. You drive down the street and you see a sign on the side of the road. I call them, and they're like, "Do you have a house to sell?" I say, "No, but are you? Do you? Do you have a house to sell? Because I'm buying, right?" So you'd be amazed at that, right? Um, there's a franchise for buying ugly houses. I'll call the local franchisees and build relationships with these investors and basically just say, "Hey, I'm looking to buy a house. These are my criteria. Do you have anything available?" And then I'll text them once a month or something just to kind of stay on their radar and be like, "Hey, still looking. I got some cash. Looking for the next one." Um, and that's really all it takes is, you want to build contacts. You want to reach out to people who are doing this. You want to reach out to your property manager, for crying out loud. Sometimes, life comes up and you've got an investor who's looking to sell and a property manager is already managing the property. So they come from all kinds of sources. But, you'd be surprised that it's not rocket science. You pick a couple and you just activity wins kind of stuff, right? Just I don't make one phone call and get a great deal. I make a lot of phone calls and I pick and choose which ones actually work for my financial situation at the time. Like, am I getting my own financing? Am I looking for a house with financing? Is it something I can pay cash for? Or, if it's a $500,000 house, I'm not paying cash for it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I remember years ago, um, there was a gentleman, he had a lot of money. He said, I want to buy houses. I want to buy a house today. Where can you go and get me a house today? And I kind of just gave this dumbfounded look, like, what do you mean? Like, I'm in the, at the time in the business of wholesaling properties to folks, and I didn't know there was a place where you could just go and get a property, a deal today. And I literally had to sit there and think about it for a minute. But there is typically in every single town, almost every single day, there is a foreclosure, tax sale, auction that is happening either at a local attorney's office or at courthouse steps that are being advertised. And heck, there's even online auctions now, and there's websites for online auctions, and they are legitimately auctioning these properties off to the highest bidder. Um, you go to the auctions in our local market now, there's 20 or 30 people there, but there was not too many years ago where you could go to an auction and you would literally be the only person there and you could win a house a dollar over the opening bid. People almost don't even think it's true, but I personally know people have done that. I am not one of them. Um, but I think that that's one of those things. If somebody had a gun to your head and said, "Hey, you have to have a deal today," where would you go get it? You could find in one of your local
But
areas there'd be an auction.
the auctions are an interesting thing. The last auction I went to, there was a house, and I was like, this house does not work over $38,000. I have to get this house for less than $38,000 for it to math. There was like five people there, and they kept showing up at the last minute. I'm like, oh man, I'm wasting my time. They stopped bidding at 17 grand. Now, I ran my numbers, and for me, that house worked. I was planning to keep it. I was going to put somebody in, and the monthly amount it worked fantastically up to $38,000. Everybody else at that auction was looking at it like, if I'm going to buy this house and renovate it and sell it, or if I'm going to do wholesale, whatever I'm going to do, it doesn't math below this number, right? So one of the things I love about real estate is, the professionals need to eat. They need cash. They need to get that property in their inventory and get it out of their inventory real quick. But if you're coming along with a long-term plan or financing and you're looking out 5 years, especially right now, like the next 5 years, we're looking at a whole bunch of things that make marginal deals today that don't really cash flow look like they're going to be very promising in the 5 years, both from a monthly cash flow and a appreciation viewpoint, right? So you got to remember those kind of things. Is you might be able to do better than the investor. You may not be as fast, but if you're working a full time job and this is where you're trying to put money, and you're not a professional real estate professional, this your numbers and everybody else's numbers are not going to be different. Now, if you're doing financing and somebody else is going to pay cash and then everything else is the same, you're going to lose. If somebody else is a contractor and has cash and you're planning to use a contractor and you get financing, you're going to lose. So if somebody else is an agent and you're not an agent, there's some margin there, right? So all these factors come in. But if you're looking for a long-term plan and you got financing in place, uh, there's a lot of situations where you might be able to pay more and still have a phenomenal return than the other people. So you got to remember that you got to stick to your numbers. You got to have your plan and you got to do your math based on your own context, situation, and goals. Um, but man, like all right, even if you do have the financing and you call up the local bandit sign, you're calling the local wholesaler or real estate investor, and you're looking for a deal. You're like, I got the cash. I can renovate the thing, so I don't need it to be a perfect house. But I do need some time, right? Um, they're gonna have some houses that they need to sell next week. They're gonna have some houses where you can actually line up financing. If they've owned it and purchased them themselves. So you got a lot of situations like um, if you're getting a loan from a bank and a tree fell through the kitchen, the banks don't like to lend on houses like that, right? And if you're getting a loan from the bank, it's going to take 30 days usually. And the investors sometimes they need a cash buyer because they don't have 30 days; they got 10 days, right? So you need to just stay active and keep looking. This is whether you're on Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, whether you're calling the bandit signs, whatever you're doing to find those leads, it does require a certain amount of patience. And Chris, I want to reiterate something we were talking about earlier with the gamblers. Anybody know any fishermen, any gamblers? Well, real estate guys are in the same boat, right? Um, fishermen will tell you about this fish. It was this big. It was massive. It was huge, And they love to tell that story, but they don't tell you about how many times they went out and just sat in the sun and did not catch anything. Right? They caught a boot. That's what they caught. Right? And they don't tell that story. Um, and then gamblers, they don't tell you about the time they lost. They all tell you, I walked in the casino, I pulled the lever one time and they gave me $1 million. That's what they want to tell. Those are the exciting stories, but they don't talk about, you know, I went 20 times and I lost $500 here. I lost $100 there. I made $10 here. They don't tell that story, right? Real estate investors are the same way. Everybody wants a home run, but the truth is, um, some of my home runs didn't look like home runs when I bought them. They looked like marginal deals that I was barely excited about. But 5 years goes by, and I look back and go, "Man, that was killer." Uh, so you got to find the deal that works for you, and don't worry about missing out because the deal of a lifetime comes around about once a week. So.
Yeah, I think one of the things that brings to mind, Kevin, is, if you're looking to invest in a certain market, the better you understand that market, you will be able to pull the trigger when an actual deal comes along. So one of the things I would recommend to anybody, if you're looking to buy any type of investment, whether it's a flip or a wholesale or a, turnkey property, or you're going to hold it as a long-term rental, you need to start researching and looking on a daily basis at that market so you understand what the market is doing. You understand what a 3-bedroom, 2-bath townhouse, what those prices are, if they're renovated, what they're selling for, if they're, a fire sale, so you start to understand that when a quote unquote deal comes across, you can recognize at least that that might be a deal, and then you can further analyze it. Maybe you've got a spreadsheet or something that you're using, but if you're not paying attention to the market on a consistent basis, I would say daily, so you really understand the market that you're trying to be in and invest in, you could literally have a deal that could be, $100,000 of profit or more, come across, something you're looking at, and you not recognize that as a deal, or you not be able to see the value add opportunity because, it might be a single family house that's being sold at fair market value, but it's on a lot that's a duplex lot. And there's a whole nother lot that could be built there. There's all kinds of situations like that that come up. And if you're not in the market and looking at, the houses and, the real estate on a regular basis, you would miss it. And you don't have to spend hours, just, 10, 15 minutes a day, and just looking over things would be a big benefit.
So there's an area in our local market called the numbered streets, right? And everybody says that to mean the ghetto, right? And there's some bad blocks. There's some, you drive down at noon and everybody's out front on the street, and you're just amazed at the number of people there, right? And you don't go late at night, but there's a small section of the numbered streets that's right not by an elementary school, and the way the streets are designed, they don't directly connect to the other streets. They kind of like there's like a turn and it kind of separates the neighborhood. But if you jump through two backyards, you're outside that little neighborhood, right? If you're not aware of the market, you don't realize that the reason that little neighborhood is so good is because all the criminals realize that that elementary school right down the street is there's different rules. If you're drug dealing near a school, suddenly it's all federal crimes rather than regular crimes, and suddenly you're in more legal trouble than you expected. Now, me and you don't need to know that, but the criminals do. And if you're not paying attention to the market, you don't realize that there's this little pocket of magic that's priced and associated with the rest of the neighborhood, but really it's small families and working class people as opposed to the troublemakers just a couple blocks over, right? So there's an example of situational awareness, right? Years ago, I was shopping with a mother of two, and she was like, "No, we don't buy the beans here. I can get them 50 cents different at this other store. And these vegetables over here, I usually get them over here because they're cheaper. But we're in this store because this price is cheaper." And she listed off prices for about 30 different items, and I was blown away, right? But later on, I was thinking about it, and you talk about situational awareness, what's important to you, and she was paying attention, whereas I was not, right? So she was very aware of the price difference in these commodities. And that's all it is awareness, right? And you'd be amazed that, if you're just walking along and she was to see a certain grocery item for a drastically reduced price, she would be able to spot a good deal. Whereas I just keep walking oblivious, right? So you run into that kind of stuff. Um, and if you're calling these wholesalers on a monthly basis, even if you don't buy anything for 6 months, just looking at the deals or properties that they're offering and trying to see if they work for you starts to create situational awareness. And, just like the fisherman and just like the gambler, uh, you know, I've run into whales and giant deals that turned out fantastic, but I don't mind doing the itty bitty deals that, just, happen all the time because you're in the game, right? And you can't hit a home run if you're never swinging. So,
Yeah, I think you whether you want to be in the game full time or not, would probably depend on what your circumstances are. Many people have a full-time day job, and they don't have the time, energy to be in the real estate game full time. But it doesn't mean that you can't invest in the space and still do really well and get all of the benefits that real estate provides. And so
now,
uh,
Chris, let me tell you one thing about that is, you know, the hardest deal to do is the first one, right? Like if you just, if you just do the first one, you learn so much, right? You learn about what the lawyers are looking for, what the lenders are looking for. You learn the process, right? Um, so yeah, I'd say stay away from trying to hit home runs and just focus on that. And that first one, the more time goes on, the more you're going to learn about just how wonderful of a return even the not greatest deal in the world is, So
you're looking at real estate. I think sometimes people think it's a magic bullet, right? And you've got to get started somewhere. Like it's very rare that you would come into any kind of industry and um, win the lottery, if you will. But you can start somewhere and work your way up and do really well in just about any industry. And the same thing goes for real estate. Um, it's it's pretty neat though because you could be a developer and you're looking to buy land. You could be kind of a next level up. You could be a wholesaler of houses and you're looking for a bigger margin there. You could be a retail flipper who's trying to sell to the end buyer. You could be a turnkey provider flipper who's trying to basically sell to an investor. So maybe the renovations aren't all the way up to retail, but the mechanicals are good. Um, and then you could be that investor who's looking to buy and hold. And all of those people along that way, or along that real estate bandwidth, if you will, are looking for different margins. And they can all win and they can all do really well for themselves. And it goes back to something um, that I've heard repeatedly, and sometimes it's harder to grasp this in practice than it is to say it, but it's don't count the money in another man's pocket. And and really what that means is if you're making the money you need to make, don't worry about how much or how little or if any that the next guy or the person before that made, because it doesn't matter so long as you are making what you need to make.
I saw that recently on a person doing a renovation. The guy bought a house, used hard money, so he borrowed from a guy down the street. We're going to call him Bob. So he borrowed money from Bob, and the guy spent 2 months working on this house, swinging hammers, dealing with headaches and contractors. And at the end of the day, uh, the property sells and he makes 20 grand. And at closing, he realizes that Bob, the lender, made 20 grand as well. And he was upset. And he said, you know what? I'm not doing this again. I don't need Bob making as much as I made. And I'm like, you you made 20 grand for 2 months of work. Like that's what you should be focused on, not what Bob made. So he would rather make $0 than have Bob make a dollar. So that was just a recent example I ran into, and I think you're missing the point when you do that. But also, you talk about there's all these different um, positions in real estate and different lifestyles, right? You know, and there's a lot of synergy there, right? Like the contractors need investors, the investors need the contractors. Um, the landlords are important, and the wholesalers need somebody to sell that property to. So yeah, you got to really look at like how active do you need to be? Are you using the real estate to eat, or are you trying to get a return greater than offered in the market? So I did something silly this week. Do you want to hear about it, Chris?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I got a flyer in the mail from a finance guy who was offering a steak dinner at a local restaurant called Steinhofer's. All I had to do was listen to his pitch on annuities. He didn't tell you that in the flyer, but I could kind of figure it out. So I dragged my poor wife to this thing so I could get a free steak dinner, and we listened to this guy's pitch, right? And it's basically like, sign up for this annuity and you don't lose money, right? So me and my wife were the youngest people in the room. These are people getting close to or already retired who were concerned about loss, right? And he's doing this whole pitch, and he's like, you can get anywhere from 6 to 8 to 10% on a really good time, but in general, you're going to be around here, but you won't lose money. And it was just, it was really interesting to see, like the fear-based, the people are working a normal job and they work for a normal job for a long period of time, and that money's in the market. And you know, when you're looking at your retirement and you think about how much you make an hour, and then you watch that market go up in 5% or down 5%, it gets scary, right? So one of the things I love about real estate is it's it's kind of in many ways it's boring. Like you get this property and your mortgage is 800 bucks and somebody's paying 1,000 bucks. Guess what? Next month your mortgage is going to be 800 bucks and their rent's going to be 1,000 bucks. And that can create some stability while also offering superior freaking returns to what that awful annuity was offering, right? And but everybody's got different goals. Everybody's got different fears or aspirations or dreams. And while I got a steak dinner, my wife also told me that we would not be doing any more of those. So
That's awesome. At least you got to go to a good restaurant, so and get a good free meal out of it. And I think this just knowledge is power, right? You don't know what you don't know, and if you were taught to go to work and work hard and work for 30, 40, 50 years and save money and give it to some financial person and everything's going to be good at the end of the day, and you never took the time to invest in your own financial education, um, that's what you end up with. Um, so back to our question, where do you find real estate deals? I wanted to make sure I shared with you guys um, my two best places for the real estate deals that I've gotten. One is from a uh, a real estate flipper who goes to auctions and buys properties. I literally bought the house I live in from this gentleman. So that turned out really well. My wife's super excited about that. And I've bought, I think, four other properties from him. And basically what it boiled down to is he bought the properties, was able to do a little bit better analysis. He knew his cost, and he knew to get it to a retail level to sell it and then make the profit that he wanted to make, 20, 30, 40 plus grand. It was not going to be necessarily a winning deal for him, but for me, on my own personal house, which I'm a retail buyer, it was a home run for us because we were doing all the renovations, so on and so forth, had a lot of equity built up. And then on some of the investment properties, um, the properties didn't need to be in brand new-ish condition to be able to be rented. So like they were still really good long-term holds. So that's my number one place. And then my number two place, which every time I say this, somebody tells me that I am just full of it and there's no way. My number two place is from the MLS, and it is what that is. If you don't know, it's the multiple listing service that all real estate agents and realtors use to list their properties, sell their properties in any local market around the country. I just pay attention to ours every single solitary day. And one of the tricks that I've used to get some of the deals that I've seen pop up, as opposed to using my own real estate agent to go out and negotiate an offer and present an offer, I will literally call the agent directly and I will let that agent who is listing the property write both sides of the transaction. So then that agent basically doubles their commission on the same property. And they are essentially they're not doing anything illegal. They're acting as a dual agent, but they have a big financial incentive to push my offer through to the client that they're representing. So anyway, those are my two biggest that I've used. I've used all kinds of different ones in the past, postcards to probate to people who are getting divorced, done door hangers on doors, gone and knocked on the doors for every foreclosure in town. Um, you know, I, Networker of wholesalers. Like I've done all of those things. Kevin has probably done even more than that. Kevin, share some of maybe your best strategies.
I mean, one of the things I love about real estate is you don't have to be a rocket scientist. So I actually do know a rocket scientist who's a real estate investor, but you don't have to be. Like, if you're just good at adulting, good at budgeting, and keeping this stuff straight, you get to win big. But I'm going to say my two strategies are networking, relationships, and there's different market cycles. There was a time where everything was coming off MLS. There was a time where everything was coming off door knocking. I think it did 60 plus houses one year just from knocking on the doors of people who were approaching foreclosure. Right now, it's not MLS. I did do one deal off there, but it's direct mail. You send letters to the owners, right? I have somebody who's doing really good at handwriting letters, handwriting the address and mailing it to them. And I'm like, I'm just tired thinking about it. But they get a great response rate because, they're a person, not a flyer. So there's a lot of strategies. But if I was working a full-time job and I was interested in putting some of my money into one, two, or five, or six, or 10 properties, I'd probably be talking to an agent and I'd probably be calling the bandit signs and talking to professionals. And basically, I'd be telling them, like, if you come across a deal where, you own it or you have the ability to sell it to me and let me get a mortgage, basically, do you have 30 days? Is it structured the right way? Did you actually buy this house or are you signing the contract? I'd ask those questions and trying to build a relationship. And, those guys are happy to sell you, even if you only buy one or two houses a year, because they know that you're able to pay slightly more than the contractor who needs to make that $30,000 profit. If you're structured in such a way that you get to keep it 30 years, and make a fantastic return on your money, whereas you're not trying to make a living on that investment like the wholesalers and the rehabbers are, they get real excited about you. And when you call them and they sell your house and you call them again 6 months later and say, hey, I'm ready for the next one, they get real excited about that phone call because they know it means an extra $5,000-$10,000 to their pocket. And you get a deal where that's phenomenal, right? Rehabbers got to factor in all these costs that you're not worried about. You're worried about return on your investment through, rental checks on a monthly basis, whereas the rehabber knows that as soon as he sells this house, he's paying 10% cost, right? Cris is talking about using an agent, so instead of splitting the 6% that the agents get, 3% of this one, 3% of that one, that one's getting 6% and doubling their money. That's a big deal to them. But if you're keeping it as a rental property, you're your return math is going to be very different, right? Your even your taxes are going to be different because you're keeping it for long term. So you get all these things that you're not going to have to factor in that they do. So um, networking, I would say, start making friends, and it can just be a phone call every month, a text message here and there. Just have them on your radar and let you know. So there's a town around here called Suffolk, and I got a guy out there who's got 8 multifamily, and I talk to him about once a month. But guess what happens when I get a multifamily in Suffolk? I'm like, I know who I need to call. I need to call this guy. He's going to get a regular mortgage. He actually works for a bank. So, I'm like, you know, if the deal fits, I know what his criteria is. And I think of him more as a casual acquaintance slash friend than I do, a guy who's harassing me once a month. So I'd say networking.
Awesome. Great advice, Kevin. And we appreciate everybody being on the podcast and listening to us, and hope that you got a great deal of value from this, and um, where to find your real estate deals, how to go about it. And we look forward to having you on the next one. Take care.